The Tokugawa shogunate is going to be the last dynasty to rule in Japan in the medieval or feudal period. It's going to rule from Edo, which is the old name for Tokyo, and it's going to rule for a period of around 250 years. It is going to also usher in a period of incredible stability, but along with that, a period of isolationism, whereby Japan is cut off from the outside world, at least until 1853. Okay. In 1853, Matthew Perry is going to be ordered by the President of the United States to go to Japan to forcibly open the ports in Japan to American trade. Perry is going to succeed in doing that by bringing with him metal steamboats with cannon, and he is going to steam right past the wooden ships of the samurai, forcing Japan to open to the West. This is going to lead to significant changes in Japan. That is going to include the elimination of the samurai and the modernization of Japan. As a part of this, the emperor will return to power and the system of shogunates will be eliminated. It will also lead directly to the modernization of Japan, which will lead to Japan's participation in World War II. Hence the slide that's on the left of the screen that we're looking at. For the world of art, the results of opening Japan to the West, however, are much happier and are incredibly significant. The most important contribution that Japan is going to make to the West will be in the form of Oriental popular prints. When the doors of Japan are open for trade, Oriental popular prints will flood out of Japan into Europe. These are colored woodblock prints that were created largely for the merchant class and below, recording what's referred to as the floating world, ukiyo-e, images of the floating world. This would be temporary pleasures, ordinary people doing ordinary things, perhaps celebrities, but in general, the brief pleasures that we experience in life. These images coming into Europe allowed Japan to become incredibly significant in terms of design and in terms of art. You're going to see, in fact, that I've written here that there was a craze for everything that was Japanese, and that's referred to as Japanism. This absolute embracing of all ideas and all decorative qualities coming out of Japan. Okay, one of the artists who was influenced, and there were many, but one of the artists who was influenced was Vincent van Gogh. That is one of his famous self-portraits located on the left. It's Vincent after he removed his ear. He is in a mental institution, and behind him is his easel on one side and an Oriental popular print on the other. I'd like you also to take a look at the right side of the screen. What we have here is a copy that Vincent made from the cover of a book of illustrations that incorporated Japanese fashion, Japanese art, Japanese design. Vincent van Gogh was heavily influenced by images coming out of Japan that we would now call Oriental popular prints. Okay. This, in fact, is the comparison that O'Reilly gives us, figure 536 and 535. It's Vincent van Gogh, and he's located on the right. And it is another, I'm going to say relatively direct copy that Vincent van Gogh made. Obviously, he's changed the style. Vincent has his agitated brushwork, and we can see the brushwork. It's more claustrophobic. It's definitely more reflective of Vincent van Gogh, with, in this case, color variations that are less subtle, stronger areas of color, overall giving us a work that tends to have a greater tension to it that we would associate with Vincent van Gogh. The work that's on our left, which is the original. It's by a pretty famous Japanese illustrator whose name is Hiroshige. And I'd like to just use this as an example to talk about the style of Oriental popular prints. First of all, they tend to be colorful. But they incorporate flat areas of color with an extraordinary flair for the decorative. They're also very linear, and it is outlines, black outlines, that tend to separate the color areas. There is also an asymmetrical quality to the organization within the image. It tends to appear to be more natural and more uncomposed, or we could just simply say more informal. These images also look very much as if they've been cropped, a little bit like a photograph. In other words, cut off at the edges. And we often also like some photographs as well, and there are similarities between Oriental popular prints and photography. These are often depicted from above, so we're looking down at the image. In this case, as in many others, there's also a very strong diagonal that runs through the depiction, and if you look at the text under the image, you're going to see that Hiroshige's piece is from 100 famous views of Edo. I'm stressing that because it does reference a series, works of art that were created in a series, in this case 100 different woodblock prints that were created of the city of Edo, or modern Tokyo. Other artists as well were influenced very strongly by Oriental popular prints. Certainly one of them is Monet. Monet is said to have discovered Oriental prints while he was in a spice shop making a purchase, and his packages were wrapped in Oriental popular prints. How could that be? There were so many of these in Japan and so many in Europe that they were not very expensive. And in fact, in Japan, they could actually have been used to wrap fish. So that these things were not given the value, perhaps, that we give them today. And they were readily available. They were mass-produced woodblock prints. There would have been the artist who creates the original drawing, there would be a block cutter, and there would also be a publisher. So it was a kind of team effort to create these images. What we're looking at here on the screen includes a painting, upper right, by Monet, and in this painted image we do see the Japanese bridge in the painted image of Monet's water lily pond. He actually had on his property a reconstructed Japanese bridge to go over his water lilies. He was, like Vincent, embracing everything Japanese. Okay, the work on the left, in fact, is a painting of his wife wearing a kimono and holding a Japanese fan. The three images below are just some of the Oriental popular prints that were among the works that were part of Monet's collection. So we know that he actually had these. He had these to look at, and that includes the Great Wave, which is certainly one of the most famous of the Oriental popular prints. Okay, this is Hokusai's Great Wave. O'Reilly has it in the book, 532, and it is from 36 views of Mount Fuji. It too was created in a series. It is revered as a famous and much beloved Oriental popular print, created with a pretty clear linear outline of the Great Wave as it sweeps with an incredible sense of force and power, curving form that comes down, breaking at the end of the waves into stylized fingers. If you take a close look, you're going to find more than one boat being embedded into the moving waves of the composition. So it's flat, it's linear, it's decorative, it's clearly asymmetrical. The wave in the foreground, which surges upward with the white cap on it, also echoes the shape of Mount Fuji, which is located in the background. Okay, in this series of 36 views of Mount Fuji, what Hokusai does is to give in the foreground of these images human activities these human activities tend to be fleeting activities. In this case, certainly the men in the boats are concerned with their own survival as the great wave crashes over them. In contrast, Mount Fuji, the tallest of all of the mountains in Japan and the most sacred, remains eternal and stable. Okay. This is by another fairly famous artist. All three of these ladies are created as reflections of ideal beauty. The one that O'Reilly gives us is in the center, and it is a woman holding a fan. Utamaro, the creator of the original drawings of these images, is very famous for his series of beautiful women, created with gentle, thin, flowing lines that create form and also separate the color areas within the composition. All of these lovely ladies are also designed with asymmetrical compositions, and all of them are engaged in rather mundane activities. This is one of the features of Oriental popular prints. They are average, ordinary people engaged in generally ordinary activities, such as a woman simply holding a fan. This is going to be tremendously influential for the Impressionists, who are also going to be depicting images of ordinary people doing ordinary things. Okay, this isn't just an insight into the influence and the power of Oriental popular prints. This is Frank Lloyd Wright on the left. He's a great American architect, and we know him for his architecture. But guess what? He sold Oriental popular prints. And there were periods in his career when he actually made more money doing that than building buildings. For those of you who know Mr. Wright's work, you could also guess that his designs are influenced by Japanese art, architecture, and in fact, Oriental popular prints. The arrival of Matthew Perry in 1853 is going to change the history of Japan. The fact that Perry's steamships could run right past the samurai will lead to the Meiji Restoration, which will be the return of the emperor ruling in Japan, and the incredible modernization of Japan, which has been described as unparalleled in history. The samurai will be eliminated, the shogunate will be removed, and the emperor now will rule. The emperor is going to rule with the tool, I'm going to call it, of state Shinto. That means that Shinto now is going to be the religion of choice for the empire, and it's also going to become the tool of the state in order to support the divine nature of the emperor, and therefore the right of the emperor to rule. The emperor, we do need to remember, is believed to have descended from the sun goddess Amaterasu. Okay, this will take Japan into World War II, and with that, the loss of the war to Allied forces, Allied occupation, and that's what we're looking at in the slide right now. What I would like us to see on the right is Emperor Hirohito, who arrives to sign the surrender agreement. As part of this, Japan will be required to open to free speech, free religion, in other words, no more state Shinto, and freedom of thought. This is going to, in fact, earn women the right to vote in 1945. The Japanese government is also going to be forced to dismantle Shinto shrines, and amazingly, on New Year's Day 1946, the Japanese Emperor Hirohito is going to take to the airwaves, the radio, and he is going to deny his kami status. This, I'm sure, shook Japan to its core. Okay. As we look at the burial site of Emperor Hirohito, however, I do have to raise the question of if the Japanese people ever fully accepted the denial of divine status, because the tomb of Hirohito is in fact marked by a torii gate. Torii gates traditionally mark the site and space, the sacred space of kami. Okay. In the postmodern period, after the death of Hirohito, artists for the first time are able to actually investigate and talk about and consider the meaning and sources of World War II.